You're listening to the Otis Jiry channel.
Chapter 5. Escape. Professor Benson went on his now regular late afternoon walk. It helped him to think. Dusk fell over Grimsfell as he looked out over the hillside and cliffs toward the sea with a November chill in the air. The wind had dropped and the stillness felt quite surreal, with only the sound of the distant waves upon the rocks far below, and the moonlight creating an intense, eerie light. On his way back, he noticed a brother was standing by one of the straggly cypress trees, with his hood up against the cold. "Got a bit much in there today. Are you enjoying the fresh air, too?" the professor called out as he approached. "I wanted to speak with you, if that's all right," said the monk quietly. "Certainly. Did you want to go back inside, or shall we talk here?" "We'll talk here," said the brother insistently, walking behind a tree by the abbey wall, furtively peering out from under his hood. The professor followed, eager to hear what he had to say. "You know too much." "What did you say?" "I must eliminate you," he said, pulling his hood to one side to reveal a hideous facial contortion, as if he was fighting against what he had just said. "I'm sorry. I can't help myself. It's too strong." "Steady on. What's too strong? Perhaps we better go inside." "I have to protect my masters. I have to kill you," he whispered as he put his arm around the professor's shoulders. "I guess you are Brother Thomas." "How did you know that?" he said angrily, with his voice now raised. "It's my job to know these things," he explained lamely, deciding what to do next. Suddenly, Brother Thomas lunged at him with a knife. The professor moved at the last split second, and the weapon struck into his shoulder as he instinctively punched out at his assailant. Above them appeared the ravens, as if from nowhere, swirling and diving at the professor, with their huge beaks tearing at his face. He ran along by the wall and out behind the abbey to the cemetery, and beyond the mausoleum, fighting off the birds trying to tear his head to pieces. Soon he was at the foot of Oros, still running and looking for cover in the half-light, wiping away the blood streaming from his shoulder and face, all the while grateful, at least, that Brother Thomas had missed his heart and was nowhere to be seen. He had no idea where he was, but carried on running all the same, lashing out at the flying black enemy whenever he could, landing some satisfying punches. After a while he was sure the ravens had either lost him or given up the chase for now, but thought it prudent to wedge himself into one of the many large rock fissures. He was no longer a young man, and fought the exhaustion as best he could, wiping the blood from his eyes and jamming his wound with his handkerchief as he drifted into dreams. "Do you need some help?" A voice penetrated his mind, but the professor was only dreaming. "Here, let me look at that wound. What happened?" the voice said with an educated accent. Dragging himself half awake, he became aware of the glare of a torch and a scruffy man standing next to him, helping him in his hour of need. "Stabbed. I was bloody stabbed by one of the monks at the abbey. Where did you come from?" "I live here, or rather in the mountain," he said, matter-of-factly. The professor conveyed his gratitude to the mountain man, who wrapped his shoulder with his scarf and began mopping his face with his handkerchief, whilst explaining how he had become a hermit. "I was a monk at the abbey many years ago and had to escape with my life because of the evil things that went on there, and I never went back. I like it here on the mountain, well away from any trouble and close to nature. Not too good in the winter, mind you, but I have a wonderful big house. I call it a house, but really it's an enormous cave. There's an extensive cave system running throughout the side of the mountain, he explained enthusiastically. As the professor gradually regained his strength and composure on the cold, bleak mountainside, he told the comforting stranger who he was and why he was at the abbey, and also what he had been discovered beneath the mausoleum. You found the Halloween chamber in the Oros River tunnel, then. How did you discover it at all? Asked the professor. I simply followed the tunnel downhill from beneath my cave by torchlight many years ago now. I've seen what goes on at Halloween under the old mausoleum. It's horrific. I've been just outside the chamber's river entrance and witnessed the evil for myself. I only ever did that once. I've seen the 4 black birds fly up through the tunnel from the witch's cave, I guess, as that's open to the outside on the cliff. They position themselves on the 4 walls of the chamber at midday on Halloween and transform back to their human form as the Bennett siblings. They chant away in some demon language to procure the presence of what I can only describe as an evil entity that's half corporeal and half gas. It emanates from the orifice in the floor like an evil fart from the devil himself. The devil's arsehole, I call it. Brother Dawson told me this too, but how could you see all of this happening without them spotting you? Therefore, too gone in their frenzied work to notice the torchlight. Besides, there's some daylight from the open well shaft above through the center of the ceiling. The next phase is even more disturbing. The gaseous demon changes into a thick miasma to become millions of separate entities. I call them miasmids. They flow copiously out the river entrance and down to beneath the abbey. That's the evil which permeates the abbey to turn good monks like me into automaton evilids, to do the bidding of the evil collective mind force of the Bennets. You escaped from the abbey? Sorry, I hadn't asked your name. I'm Duncan. I escaped much the same as you, in a more lucid moment after I'd become affected. I ran from the abbey to here, Oros, and discovered the caves. I've lived here ever since. Come inside and see. Duncan helped the ailing professor to his feet and led him higher up the slope. Removing an old wooden fence behind a scraggy bush revealed an opening into the vast limestone wall. How did you find the entrance? Luck. Pure luck. You need some occasionally, he said philosophically. But this isn't the only way into the system. I've found many more over the years. Well, I was certainly lucky that you found me when you did. I could have easily bled to death, said the professor, warmly shaking Duncan's hand with his good arm. The narrow limestone entranceway became gradually larger, then suddenly opened up into a large, high-ceilinged cave. Just along here is my living room, he smiled. That's good, sighed the relieved professor, hanging off of Duncan's shoulder. I could do with a nice long sit-down. Much to his surprise, Duncan's living room did have what appeared, in the flash of torchlight, to be a dilapidated settee. Put it together myself, after I'd sawn it into 3 pieces to get it through the rock, he explained proudly. Someone in the next village had left it out for the dustbin men, so I made good use of it, he said, plonking himself down, accompanied by a cacophony of creaks. I also have some old cupboards and boxes, lots and lots of boxes. Excuse me for a moment. Duncan lit an enormous oil lamp before going to another part of the cave, and came back with bandages, a cloth, and a bottle of yellow fluid. I keep these for emergencies. Have you got a sink, too? Asked the professor, nervously joking. I have a large, sturdy pail, he said proudly. I light a fire in the corner for cooking, and when it's really cold, but there's a problem with smoke when it blows back in, if it's too windy out there. I discovered there's a natural updraft in here through an opening at the very top where the smoke tends to be drawn to, but I haven't explored where it comes out. It's inaccessibly steep outside. The temperature stays pretty constant in caves, so it's quite pleasant. I have to return to the Abbey soon, Duncan, said the professor resolutely, even though my life's in danger. I have a plan to end this madness if you could help me. It will be too difficult and dangerous for me to do alone, but essentially, we could ambush the Halloween ritual by creeping down the river tunnel on the morning of the 31st next year. If we can attack and kill the Bennett siblings in human form, they will no longer be immortal as Corvids to continue repeating their yearly evil. Sounds feasible. I just need you to convince me that you're not raving mad. Okay, how much do you know about Grimsville Village? I'll tell you what I know, Duncan. It's where the Bennetts came from centuries ago, and that Alice, the witch, is thought to be partly responsible for turning young women into witches for her coven and abducting children, according to papers uncovered by the landlord of the Witch's Brew pub, explained the professor. Her revenge for having spent centuries as a crow is to meet with her raven brothers each Halloween to conjure the miasmic demon from the portal between the worlds of good and evil. Also, that often, around Christmas time, a village child goes missing, never to be seen or heard of again. George, the landlord, told me this. He seemed keen for me to know. It seems the demonic monks, transformed by the miasma, are driven to wander around the village during the following month or two, intent on kidnapping a child just before Christmas, as Bennett revenge puppets against the murderous actions the villagers and monks took centuries before. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? But that's the truth of the matter, Prof. After much more discussion, Duncan agrees to the plan, and 3 weeks later, the professor feels well enough to attempt his return to the Abbey.